My name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, awarded the RevTech Strategist of 2024. In this week's episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, my guest talks about how he spent 19 years in film, and actually it was the need to make money that moved him into sales, and he's been in sales ever since. He's recently wrote a book and talks about he's looking at directing again. But his real passion for closing, the closing aspect of sales being absolutely fundamental. And what underpins all of this, absolutely belief. In our discussion, he gives lots of examples as to why it's such an essential skill and why belief underpins this. My next guest wrote the book, The Joy of Closing. It reveals the secrets of earning the customer's business and getting them what they want. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Bob King.
Thank you, Janice. Great to be here.
I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you because you have got an interesting perspective, and I've done a few interesting things that not many of my guests have done before. Directed Psycho Beach Party. Now, that's a bit left field. Where did that come from?
I went to school for filmmaking, and I made a couple of movies. Psycho Beach Party, which was a big deal at Sundance the year it came out, and launched a lot of careers, just not mine. And a few years after that, I made another movie called Bad Actress that more or less inspired my career in sales. Basically, I needed to make money after that movie. And so that's how I got into sales.
Interesting. Okay. But you've been in sales for a while now, so there must have been some things that kind of think, well, I really enjoy this, or I can go deeper into, or there's some aspects of it that's really kind of kept you going.
I started off, I always love con artist movies. I've always been drawn to, characters who seem like they're doing the wrong thing, but for the right reasons. And that kind of mix, the Lady Eve and the Sting and all those kind of movies. And my career in sales, I started off selling tea for this woman because I love tea, and I walked into this shop. She needed some help. I started selling tea. The thing about sales is the more zeros after what you're selling, the more money you're going to make selling whatever that is. And tea is not expensive. And so I did not make a lot of money selling tea. The person I was working for ended up going out of business and not paying me the commission that was owed me and all this stuff. So I was pretty desperate, and I needed money for rent. I went to this job interview in an office, off the 405 freeway in Los Angeles, and met this guy who was a guy who could sell you a blender at the state fair on a day you never thought about blenders. And I wanted to know how they did it. And so he closed me on the training at the first meeting. And they paid to train you. They paid you $600 a week, and my rent was $1,200. And I took the training, and in the middle of the second week, he told us the con, basically like what you do to get the customer, engage the customer's greed, and get them to do this today. Mm-hmm. And but we were selling solar power. It seemed like it was good for the environment and good for the customer. And if that's what it took to get someone to have the confidence to move forward, who was I to second guess that? And I really never thought I would even go on a job interview. I just wanted to know the trick so I could write a movie about it. But I was kind of the star of the class, and I really liked the guy training me. And so I figured I owed it to him. And I started selling deals and earning customers' trust. And that was a really satisfying experience. Shortly after that, I came to understand how bad the company I was working for was. And I got out of there. And then I went from there to a different company, similar tactics, slightly better reputation. But it really helped me understand what makes customers decide to move forward on the first day with a sale. And so a few months after that, someone I worked with at the other company started a startup, and I became their head of sales. And suddenly I was running a sales team and training people how to sell. And there's some things you just know how to do. And I know how to turn salespeople into closers. That's just whatever skill I discovered relatively late in life. I have that skill. And so I started doing it. And we went from a company with like, 2 friends and family sales to doing millions of dollars a month in a matter of 6 months, and having offices in San Diego and LA. And we were, an exciting startup, making the world cleaner and greener, and saving customers a lot of money.
So this is interesting because it sounds quite traditional sales, and it's all about the close, and there's various tactics that you use. Kind of, there's an uncomfortable area as well in the reputation of sales, and also the skill of sales is kind of a gray area. So
it is, and I think it's
challenge you
part of,
with that, what would you say? Well, yeah.
I think that stigma is a lot of times created by the reason I wrote a book about it is I think that stigma is often created by the way people are trained to close. And it's this weird, like, customer is enemy, self-will approach to something that really is about being of service and getting the customer what they want. And so, and so, I mean, just to finish the sort of biography part of it, I went from there to a very reputable company, and I realized this was the opportunity that I'd, been waiting for all along. And I had to figure out how to close people without tricking them and engaging their greed. And what I found is belief. It's just believing in what you do is the magic that makes someone have the confidence to move forward with you. You still need to, but I also recognize the value of all the techniques I've been trained in for sort of, clearing their, bringing clarity to their chaos and making their focus. There's a lot of things you do to earn trust in a sale that isn't natural. You have to be so meticulous with your word. You have to really, there's so many things. I mean, there's a lot of things I detail in the book, but what I realized was, what I was trained in is called one call closing. And, it's fuller brush, man, aluminum siding, you know what I mean? It's that kind of sales. It's how do you get the customer to go forward on the first day? But in the process of doing that, you're building trust, you're getting them excited about a project, you're making them feel the pain of their current situation and the pleasure of your solution. And all of those things, when you put them in a like non-high pressure sales situation, lead to great success. And that's what happened to me. And then as that happened to me, I started consulting and I started coaching other people, and not just solar salespeople, other industries and things like that. And I realized that what I had was really valuable to other individuals and help them achieve success in a way that they felt really good about. And so that's why my book's called The Joy of Closing, because earning someone's trust and delivering them from the misery of their indecision is a very joyful process that not only is good for the customer, but in my case, I was in the film business for 19 years. I got hired 6 times. And what I found, one of the hardest things about this training, with I call him the English guy in the book, was all the ways I realized I had blown, because essentially when getting hired is someone wanting to work with you, right? And when you're in the film business, someone wanting to work with you isn't like, oh, I'll make a decision and I trust you and we're going to see what happens. It's, you're going to direct my movie and we're going to be hanging out hours and days and months together. And they have to really like you and trust you and want to do business with you. And I did not learn how to do that till I learned how to one call close.
Okay. So much in here, Bob. Okay, so what we have is a diversity of products. Some are pretty shitty and of very little value to customers, and some are just excellent and very valuable to customers. The problem is the filter between is the salesperson, because the customer doesn't know. They can do some research, but it's white box. They all look the same. So you put that skill in, give that skill to salespeople, then they're going to be selling some pretty terrible products along with some good products. So is the onus on the salesperson or is the onus on the customer? Because if the skill is the same, who actually carries the can at the end of the day?
I'm really glad you're asking that question, because it was a really big thing to me. Like, I don't want to train people how to rip people off. That wasn't my goal. I say in the book, if you don't believe in what you're doing, it's really an uphill battle. Like, yeah, you can manufacture that, and you know, some people are better than others at training themselves to not be aware of all the ways that their product is deficient or worse, or the same, and they're just charging more. There's always going to be some justification for it. Look, nothing's perfect, right? No company's perfect. Human beings make mistakes. We're often on the sort of, we paint this beautiful picture, and then sometimes it clashes with reality. And it's really important for the salesperson not to have unrealistic expectations, you know, just because they painted the picture. As you go through the process, a lot of times we're just the first part of that process. And then there's operations and, you know, ongoing stuff that if the salesperson becomes too precious, they can, you know, actually not only undermine their own confidence, but they can create an unhappy customer. You know, you never want to say to a customer that never should have happened. You know, that's literally turning them into a victim. You always want to take responsibility whenever possible for anything that goes wrong. But beyond the larger scope of that, if you're working for a company that's ripping people off, my book is not the answer. Please don't use it for that. Because if you really read it, what it says is you have to believe in what you're doing. And when you believe in what you're doing, but you should believe in it from an expert standpoint. Hopefully you know enough about what you're selling to know how your product is different and better if you're charging more, or how it's a great value if you're, you know, a great value. If that's, you know, whatever it is, you have to understand your value proposition, and you have to believe that that's the best thing for the customer that you're selling. And if you don't believe that, most of the stuff I detail, it's just going to be tricks you can play on the customer instead of a way to connect with the real purpose of you, to be of service to them and give them the absolute best advice. You know, there's no substitute for giving your customer expert advice. And yeah, when you show up at a sales call, you know, you put on the lab coat, right? You need to be their trusted expert. And I 100% believe in that. And I'm not telling anyone to pretend to be that who doesn't take the time to actually become that. So
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, it does. It does. Okay, so I have another one to throw at you, Bob.
Yeah.
Around the sales operation, the business of sales, in the way that it's structured, in terms of you have, you know, a sales leader, and then you might have a sales manager and sales reps and sales support. And, you know, like, it's like one is all dependent on the other. So if you have, you know, a really bad manager, then you often have bad salespeople. If you have a really bad sales leader, then you have a bad manager, you know, that's trying to protect his salespeople and everything like that. And we often find that, you know, we have this triangle of dependency. And then at the very top, you've got the CEO, you've got the shareholders, and you've got the investors. Now, their goals for the company. So you've got this salesperson, he really believes what he's doing. He knows how to close, but everyone else above them has different motives. And, you know, that filters down. So, you know,
it's so funny you say that. So I have friends who are in sales and things like that. Let me just say this. If the owners of the company are anything other than former salespeople, like I work, you know, with a company now that it's run by two people who used to be in sales. It's the only example out of everyone I know in sales and everyone I've consulted where once you become successful, they don't try and pay you less money. Like, that's just a normal thing, because if you're really good at sales, you should be making more money than your manager, and you should be making more money than what the owners think you deserve, unless they're former salespeople, in which case they'll get it. There's a chapter in my book called Managing Your Manager. And the default for a salesperson, or a human being really, is to blame others for their problems, right? So it's the leads stink, or, you know, there's some new competition that, you know, makes it impossible for me to get a deal. And all that stuff is never true. The great thing about sales is the sales engagement with the customer is all about the customer. but your success is really all about you. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about sales, is there's just so much evidence that your mind state going into the meeting and going into the pitch, going into the whatever you want to call, different appointment, if it's a, skincare consultant or something like that, how you feel about it is really largely going to determine the outcome more than anything, any other outside factor. So sales managers, no matter what, so the default for an owner is that the salespeople make too much. And if the sales manager is not getting in the middle of that and protecting their team, in my opinion, they are a terrible sales manager. Someone needs to, be the salesperson can't say, no, I don't. The sales manager needs to say, well, here's what I need for my team to feel happy and successful. And if you give me those things, we're going to bring on more success. And if we try and undercut, their salary because they've had success, the outcome of that is never good. And I see that a lot. Like it amazes me how common it is for when a salesperson becomes very successful for the people who hire them to suddenly want to pay them less money. It's crazy, but it happens every day. And so a good sales manager will get in the way of that. And I mean, I don't really know a lot. I was a manager for about 2 months. I gave them my snowboarding schedule for 2015. They said, you can't leave your management. I said, I don't need to manage for you. Put me in houses. And we've been happy ever since. And I never have made less money than my sales manager that I'm aware of. And of course, you never want to discuss that. But the flip side of it, so the default of the salesperson is my manager's out to get me. And the cure for that is in my book called The Joy of Closing. There's a short chapter called Managing Your Manager. And what I realized after being a manager and then having one, and if you think, it's hard having a manager, try having a manager after you've been a manager. That's like 100 times worse. What I had to do was think of my manager as my very favorite customer and make them a happy customer and do all the things I do to create, pay them a sincere compliment, try and, understand their needs, become interested in their life, fill their bucket, never take credit for any advice or good idea that I give them, and just like get them invested in my success. If your manager does not think of you as the most capable, the managers mostly manage leads and opportunities, right? And their job, they're usually paid based on your success. And so their job is to put that best opportunity in the hands of the person who's most likely to close the deal. If your manager does not think of you as that person, either because they like you or because they respect your accomplishments, but hopefully both, you're in it's an uphill battle. And the thing you need to do is figure out exactly how to get in that position so that you will, if you're successful, you're going to like them. And if you're not, you're going to think they're out to get you. That's usually how that works. So when you think of them as your customer, you have the opportunity to lead the relationship into something better than what you're coming from. And that's what I figured out. And I've loved all my managers except one.
I think that's a great point, because especially when you have challenging relationships, the more that you befriend them, you think of them as your customer and really understand their world from their point of view, like you would your customer, then it's a lot easier to bring them on board to get them to do what you work in the way that you want to work with them.
Yeah, if you're a closer, your relationship with a customer is kind of this idealized, beautiful world where, you are there 100% to be of service and to make their life better. And people respond really, really well to being treated that way. And so if you can do that for your manager, you're probably going to have a great relationship and a lot of success.
Yeah. Okay, so I agree that often the more successful you are, that your often your income's capped. And then that forces people to move into management or into leadership in order to uncap it.
I don't know. I know a lot of closers who never move into management, or they dip their toe in and get the hell out. That's a pretty common thing.
Yeah, it's common to be promoted, to promote your best salespeople. And
I recommend just paying them, and that would be my recommendation. And that goes on both ends. I would recommend the salespeople just take the money. Do not get into management. Why would you want to manage people when you could deal with customers?
This is interesting, because people often talk about leadership and management as the, you know, the utopia, and you seem to be talking about it as the, you know, this is taking you away from your, you know, sales and closing and, you know, what you're there to do. So it's a really interesting perspective that,
well, unless you want to think of your team as customers and make them your customers, but most people are good at closing, are better at short-term than long-term relationships in terms of like what they're really comfortable in. And so, you know, I think if you're really good at closing, you're probably not going to be that good as a manager, or you won't get the same fulfillment out of it that you do out of earning a customer's business and building trust with them and making them happy. If you're good at that, like no one's going to pay you more for doing anything than that, in my experience.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about, you know, we haven't actually talked a lot about the book and closing. So define for me what is a good closer, because you've said if you're good at closing, you're going to want to do this. So what defines a good at closing type of personality?
That's a really, you know, I know it when I see it, but it's not, it is a skill that you can learn. I think really what makes a good closer is someone who cares about people and is trustworthy. Well, I mean, I did not set out on this career to, you know, I wanted to know why my dad bought some pots and pans from a guy who ripped him off in the early 80s, no, in the 70s probably. And you know, how they did it. And what I wound up with is becoming trustworthy. And I did not see that at the, you know, beginning of this journey by any stretch of the imagination. So I think the answer is, you know, someone who is capable of growing into someone that people trust. Having said that, you know, I think there are so many fascinating new ways to sell things, you know, new ways to engage with a customer. And there's a lot of great books on that. You know, when I was, you know, trying to make a website and things like that, I watched a lot of that. I have never read a book on sales or closing. I've never gotten the only book on sales I've ever gotten all the way through is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that's because generally speaking, they kind of make my skin crawl. They just are like what I was trained in and not, you know, what I'd come to understand about the nobility of the sales process. And so the reason I wrote a book about closing is because the closing aspect, what it takes to get that customer to say yes, especially on the first day, but really just in general. I wanted a book that spoke to that in a way that wasn't about winning. You know, it's more about being of service, but you still have to do the same, you know, you have to stop. The biggest thing is to stop talking after you ask for the deal and not be afraid to ask for the deal more than 4 or 5 times. And I think what stops salespeople from becoming closers is probably like me, they started reading some book about it and said, I don't want to turn into that. That's not who I want to be to the customer. So I think that's part of it. You know, they don't want to be that person that like makes them do something but ultimately what closing is getting the customer or even another human being to take on your agenda. You know, if you're picking the book club that your next, you know, that the next book club that your book club reads, you have closed someone. If you get your kids to clean up their room, you need to close them on that. You know, it's not going to happen because, you know, they just suddenly decided to do it for the most part. So everybody's a closer and everyone needs to be closed. There is nothing more satisfying than the only thing more satisfying than getting what we want is helping someone else get what they want. And so when you think of it from that approach, it makes employing all these techniques, which, you know, sales are a closing technique. I mean, the funny thing is our culture, especially the internet, has really figured out ways to close people. You know, 1 seat left at this price. That is a close. That is not a public service announcement. That is a way to get you to say yes right now. And there are things we can do in, you know, our one-on-one meetings or, you know, who are meeting with the team or whatever. There's many things like that you know, there's a whole chapter in the book called 11 objectives and 13 closes or something like that, where I literally detail all the different ways that can happen. And none of them are like if they say this, you do that. They're all interchangeable, and you have to use your intuition, and you need practice. But the first thing is to take the stigma off it, that this isn't a way for you to get what you want and get the customer not what they want. It's a way for you to be of service and get the customer what they want and make your agenda their idea. And that's an art. It really is an art, and it really engages the intuition. And again, you're not there, it's not for the customer to be of service to you. It is for you to be of service to the customer. And that is the best way to be of service. Nobody is benefited from, having to meet with another 5 people like you and just get confused. If you have what's right for them. If you don't know what's right for them, then it's a whole other thing. But if you have what they're looking for, don't be polite. It's time to, make them feel the pain of their current situation, the pleasure of your solution, work with their resistance, and close them. And that's why I wrote a book about it, because I think it is a noble calling, and I think it does make the world a better place.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So let's switch it up a little bit. If you were on a desert island on your own, what would be the one thing you took with you, Bob?
If I'm on a desert island on my own, when you asked me about these before, you said what book, and then I told you what book. But if there's no people on the island, it doesn't really help to have a book about how to influence people. What would I want? Oh my God, I should be prepared for this. Maybe a set of fins so I can go body surfing.
Oh, right. Oh, that's interesting. You're the first person that said that, actually. Do you know what? I might throw in a little spear for you as well, so I can imagine you with your spear and your fins.
Oh yeah, that'd be good too. Yeah, I got the fins. I can catch a fish.
I want you to survive, Bob, not just have fun.
No, and I love sushi, so that'll be great.
Oh really? All right. Well, how did I know that? Okay, Bob. And we'll put links to your book in the show notes. How can listeners get hold of you?
I have a website, joyofclosing.com, and you can reach me there at bob@joyofclosing.com. I have a special right now. If you buy 20 books, I will give you an hour of free consulting. So,
thank you. Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience and interesting stories. You're a very good storyteller, Bob. Thank you for being on Scale Your Sales podcast, Bob King.
My pleasure. Thanks for being my first.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.